My name is Sierra Lawson, 32 years old, a cybersecurity expert who built a career out of securing systems that others only dreamed of cracking. I was sitting in my Seattle apartment surrounded by the three monitors that defined my world when my phone buzzed with a text from the last person I expected to make a final move, my mother. I opened the message and the words hit me with a vicious, cold precision. Even your breathing is annoying. This isn't a place for you. My heart didn't sink. It froze. Years of being the family's invisible lifeline, pouring my cutting-edge algorithmic security into their failing VC firm, covering their crucial operating costs, all gone in one brutally short declaration. I'd always been the technical one, the ghost in the machine they called only when their system crashed, the daughter they never truly saw. But that text, that final vicious dismissal, was a line I was done crossing back over. I didn't cry or beg. I didn't type out the decades of sacrifices I'd made. I just typed back one word, cold and clean. Fine. That was the end of it. The moment I hit send, I cut the cord. Less than an hour later, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree in Times Square. Missed calls, voicemails, texts stacking up. My mother's number flashed again and again, then my brother's, even my father's. They were panicking, and I knew exactly why. I wasn't just their daughter. I was the firewall holding their entire empire together, and now I was done protecting them. What happened next didn't just unravel their business. It exposed the toxic, entitled core of the family I thought I belonged to. Stick around to hear how their world went offline permanently. If you've ever felt like your success was just a resource to be mined by family, hit that like button, drop a comment with your story, and subscribe to catch the rest of this system failure. That frantic buzzing phone was the inevitable climax of a 15-year history defined by their expectation and my compliance. Growing up in the affluent suburbs outside Seattle, our family looked like the perfect portrait of tech-fueled success. My father, Walter Lawson, had founded Lawson & Kosher, a venture capital firm specializing in high-risk, high-reward early-stage startups. He was a force of nature in a bespoke suit, a man whose word was law in our glass-walled home. My mother, Victoria Lawson, managed his elaborate social life, and the family's image, her sharp smile reserved for clients and investors, rarely for me. The Lawson legacy was supposed to be about investment and profit margins, but I, Sierra Lawson, was drawn to the absolute certainty of code. While Dad preached about valuation rounds and IPOs, I was dismantling and rebuilding digital infrastructure. I chose to study cybersecurity at a university back east, a decision Walter dismissed as niche and non-essential. He made it explicitly clear, the only value in technology is the money it generates, Sierra. You'll learn the business. When I graduated and established my own firm providing proprietary security algorithms and digital forensic services to major tech companies, he acted as if I were running a glorified IT help desk. My younger brother, Austin Lawson, 4 years my junior, was the undisputed golden child. He was placed directly into a senior role at Lawson & Co., tasked with business development, which mostly translated to losing money on speculative deals and charming investors with his superficial confidence. Walter constantly praised Austin's instinct for the deal, overlooking the trail of red ink he left behind. Victoria's loyalty was a tangible shield around Austin, ensuring he faced zero consequences for his recklessness. The divide was clear. Austin was the legacy they desired, and I was merely the resource they were entitled to. The distance between us became an emotional chasm as my career took off. While Austin struggled to close a Series A round, I was securing data for multi-billion-dollar firms. Yet whenever the VC firm hit an unavoidable cash flow issue or one of their portfolio startups faced a crippling security breach, Walter's call would come. He never asked about my projects, only about the amount of capital or the speed with which I could deploy my unique security protocols to plug their holes. 5 years ago, Austin's mismanagement nearly sank Lawson & Co. He had guaranteed a massive loan based on a volatile startup's projected performance, and when the company imploded, the clawbacks threatened to liquidate Walter's entire stake. I didn't hesitate. I wired $300,000 to cover the immediate exposure and crucially deployed my advanced quantum-resistant security patch, the intellectual property IP I had spent years developing to salvage two key portfolio companies. I told myself it was for the family's survival, hoping the sheer scale of the bailout might finally earn their respect. The result was the opposite. Austin never thanked me. At a family gathering shortly after, he boasted loudly about his aggressive restructuring that saved the firm, giving the credit entirely to his newly hired and expensive legal team. Walter clapped him on the back, pride radiating from him, while Victoria offered me a brief, distant nod, as if acknowledging a vendor, not a daughter who had just single-handedly preserved their net worth. The pattern solidified. Every few months, there was a new crisis. A critical server upgrade, I had to fund a lawsuit. Austin's careless contracts triggered that required my swift payment or emergency capital infusions to keep the lights on in their struggling holdings. Each check I wrote, each line of code I shared, was met with indifference. Their sense of entitlement grew, making my contributions feel less like a gift and more like a mandatory tax. I tried to talk to Victoria, sharing my achievements in digital defense, but she would quickly pivot. Austin is swamped trying to close the new infrastructure deal, she'd say, her voice signaling where her actual concern lay. The continuous one-sided giving chipped away at my hope, leaving behind a cold, heavy resentment. The continual bailouts were not enough, they just fueled my family's entitlement. 2 years ago, I realized I needed a path to collaboration, not just funding. My firm was thriving, and I had finalized development on Project Chimera, a revolutionary low-latency decentralized data encryption method that would change how VC firms protected their most sensitive investment portfolios. I wasn't just asking for capital, I was offering them a stake in a billion-dollar concept, hoping that tangible success tied directly to their future would finally force them to see my worth. I drafted a comprehensive business plan complete with projected returns and a minimal initial investment request of $250,000 to scale Project Chimera and license it exclusively to Lawson & Case's portfolio. I invited Walter, Victoria, and Austin to a meeting at the firm's executive lounge in downtown Seattle. This wasn't a family dinner, it was a professional pitch. When I arrived, the atmosphere was thick with condescension. Walter sat at the head of the polished obsidian table, arms crossed, tapping an expensive fountain pen. Victoria was beside him, looking bored, occasionally checking her high-end watch. Austin, playing the part of the busy executive, was on a quiet call, barely acknowledging my presence. I noticed a young woman, Chloe Davies, Austin's partner, and the firm's junior marketing associate sitting quietly nearby. She offered me a nervous, small smile, the only non-judgmental acknowledgement in the room. I started my presentation detailing how decentralized encryption would prevent the exact breaches that had cost Lawson & Co. so much time and legal fees in the past. I spoke about market need scalability and how my code would position them years ahead of their competitors. I explained the $250,000 would be used for infrastructure and legal patents, ensuring swift payback with interest. Walter cut me off 3 slides in. Decentralized encryption. He scoffed, his voice dismissive. Sierra, we invest in people who wear ties, not people who stare at terminal screens. This sounds like an overcomplicated hobby. I pushed back, showing him the market data, a clear demand for security in the tech sector. Austin finally hung up his phone, leaning back with a smirk. Look, sis. He began using that familiar patronizing tone. We already have standard protocols. My time is better spent closing a deal, not sitting through a white paper presentation on coding. Why don't you stick to making sure the Wi-Fi works in our office? Huh? My cheeks flushed, not from embarrassment, but from a surge of suppressed rage. Months of meticulous work dismissed as a trivial IT issue. I turned to Victoria, hoping her maternal instinct, however distant, might offer a lifeline. Mom, this is the future of our sector. This is a game changer. I insisted, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. She fiddled with a napkin, her gaze skirting mine. It just seems so risky, Sierra. Your father and Austin, they understand deals. That's the family business. We can't divert capital based on a private project. Her silent choice once again was louder than any verbal attack. Chloe, the marketing associate, cleared her throat softly. Actually, I think the timing is perfect, she said, glancing quickly at Austin. We've had 3 potential investors cite security concerns in the last quarter. Project Chimera looks genuinely innovative. Her support was a momentary flash of validation, but it was immediately extinguished by Austin, who shot her a sharp, possessive glare. Chloe visibly shrank back, her lips pressed shut, not daring to speak again. Walter slammed his pen down. We're not discussing this further. We are finalizing the funding for Austin's new venture in data aggregation. That, Sierra, is our priority. That's the real business. He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Austin flashed a triumphal, condescending smile. I packed up my laptop, my movements stiff. I realized then that no amount of success money or intellectual property would ever earn me a chair at their table. They had made their decision years ago, and my worth was measured only by the liquidity I could provide to keep their flawed, golden child afloat. The rejection was final, confirming my status as a replaceable tool, not a daughter. The rejection of Project Chimera settled into a cold determination. I stopped waiting for their approval and focused entirely on my own firm. About a month after that disastrous meeting, I received an encrypted anonymous message on a rarely used professional platform, a single short line. Look deeper than the accounting check, the data exchange logs. Austin is selling off your assets. My immediate thought was of Chloe Davies. She was the only person who had shown any form of decency during that meeting, and she had seen Austin's protective, almost threatening reaction when she spoke up. I knew she was likely being controlled and exploited within the firm. I set up a secure end-to-end encrypted chat channel, reaching out to her, cautiously offering anonymity and a safe space to talk. She responded within hours. It's about the firewall code you deployed to save the 2 portfolio companies 5 years ago. Chloe typed, her digital signature shaking with what I imagined was fear. The advanced one, the quantum-resistant one. Austin has been reverse engineering it. He's been modifying snippets, repackaging them as proprietary innovations, and including them in pitches to our competitors. He's taking your intellectual property, Sierra, and selling it. The betrayal was immediate and sharp, cutting deeper than the financial exploitation. The code was my lifeblood, years of intellectual effort, not just money. I knew Austin couldn't understand the intricacies of that IP, which meant he must have been copying the base code I had shared to stabilize their systems. The lack of respect for my physical money was one thing. Stealing my mind's work was unforgivable. Chloe wasn't done. She revealed that the current financial strain at Lawson & Co.S was not just due to Austin's usual incompetence, but because they were preparing for a complete restructuring, one that included me being shut out permanently. They're finalizing the new partnership agreement and updating the family will, she wrote. Walter and Victoria are terrified you'll use your equity share or financial leverage to challenge Austin's promotion to CEO. They're rewriting the will to state that any assets you receive must be directly invested into the company under Austin's operational control, or you forfeit everything. It's a classic poison pill clause. I felt a surge of cold fury. They weren't just manipulating me for cash. They were engineering a legal framework to ensure I could never have true financial freedom from them, and if I fought back, I would lose my birthright. The text message from my mother, the one that said, "Even your breathing is annoying," was likely sent right around the time the legal documents were being signed, a final emotional kick to ensure I felt worthless before they executed their plan. I needed physical evidence of the IP theft and the financial maneuvering. Using my expertise, I gained temporary secure access to the firm's internal data exchange server logs. What I found was worse than Chloe described. Not only was Austin selling my IP, but he was communicating directly with Synapse Dynamics, one of Lawson & Co.'s biggest and most aggressive competitors, offering them a significant percentage of my proprietary security system, packaged as a consulting deal. He was systematically undermining his own father's firm, and Walter and Victoria were either too arrogant or too focused on elevating Austin to notice the rot. I logged out quickly, erasing every trace of my intrusion. The gravity of the situation hit me. The family wasn't dysfunctional, it was criminally toxic. They were actively stealing from me while simultaneously preparing to legally disinherit me if I objected. The single word I had texted, "fine," now carried a weight far heavier than mere resignation. It was a silent declaration of war. The moment of decision was stark and clear. I wasn't interested in fighting over a clause in a will or arguing about ethical boundaries. I was interested in absolute clean separation and irreversible consequence. The toxic cycle had to end. That cold text message from Victoria had been the trigger, and the stolen IP was the ammunition I needed. Now I began the process of systematically dismantling the infrastructure I had spent years holding together. I started with the financial leverage. Over the years, I had quietly set up automatic payments for several of Lawson & Co. As critical recurring costs, the secure cloud hosting the premium legal retainer and the complex data licensing fees they required to operate. These were expenses Walter and Austin rarely looked at, simply trusting they were handled. I logged into my corporate banking portal and initiated the cancellation of every single automated transfer, setting the effective date for the end of the month. The amounts totaled nearly $40,000 in monthly operational expenses. When those bills bounced, the consequences would be immediate and severe, affecting their ability to conduct business. Next, I focused on the intellectual property. The quantum-resistant security patch I had deployed 5 years ago was the core of my revenge. Since Austin had simply copied and modified sections, the underlying architecture still contained a time-delayed kill switch, a digital failsafe I had built into the original code for my own protection. It wasn't a malicious virus. It was a simple legal contract clause, embedded in the code itself. If certain proprietary data was detected moving to an unauthorized third-party network, the code would self-deactivate across all hosted instances. I remotely triggered the failsafe. Within minutes, the advanced security systems protecting Lawson & Co.'s portfolio, which were relying heavily on my patch, began to roll back to their default decades-old protocols. The two key companies I had saved with my code years ago, the ones currently propping up Walter's valuation, were instantly vulnerable. They wouldn't notice the change right away, but their chief technology officers would soon be alerted to a severe degradation in their security posture, a vulnerability wide enough for any rival to exploit. The final piece of my quiet destruction involved the most immediate threat: Austin's illegal deal with Synapse Dynamics. Using the digital forensic data I had gathered, I compiled a concise anonymous report detailing the transfer of unauthorized proprietary code snippets by an internal source at Lawson & Co. The report included evidence that Austin had falsely claimed ownership and was using the IP to enrich himself. I sent the report not to Walter but directly to the General Counsel of Synapse Dynamics. My message was simple: they had been sold stolen goods. I framed it as a corporate warning, suggesting that proceeding with the deal would open them up to massive intellectual property infringement lawsuits from my firm, Sierra Lawson Consulting. I gave them a timeline of 48 hours to drop the deal and sever all communication with Austin, or face litigation that would expose them to regulatory scrutiny. Synapse Dynamics was a rational entity. They would cut their losses instantly rather than risk a public scandal involving stolen IP. This action secured my IP and eliminated Austin's immediate lifeline. Just hours before I received my mother's cruel text, all these processes were already in motion, scheduled to detonate over the coming week. The text message, "Even your breathing is annoying," didn't stop my plan. It simply expedited my departure. The moment I replied, "Fine," I officially removed myself from the blast radius, leaving them completely exposed to the financial and digital catastrophe I had engineered. 3 days after the text exchange, my phone remained silent on my end, while theirs undoubtedly continued to blow up with messages demanding my attention. The financial chaos was beginning. The cloud hosting provider critical to Lawson & Cober's operations had temporarily suspended their services after the payment bounce, and the in-house legal team was scrambling because the annual retainer had been canceled. The firm was paralyzed, a giant gilded statue suddenly crumbling without its hidden internal supports. They couldn't ignore the problem anymore. They had to confront the source. The meeting was not arranged by me. Walter's assistant called my office demanding my presence at Lawson & Cober's headquarters, immediately to discuss the catastrophic failures. I agreed, but only on my terms. The meeting would be recorded, and I insisted on meeting them in the firm's private boardroom, the same room where they had dismissed Project Chimera. When I walked in, Walter looked haggard, his usually immaculate suit now slightly rumpled. Victoria was pacing, her face tight with anger, not concern. Austin sat nervously scrolling rapidly through his phone, clearly trying to manage the external fallout. Walter launched into an immediate aggressive attack. "Sierra, what in God's name is happening? Our main servers are down. The legal team is threatening to walk. This is your doing. You deliberately caused this. You are attacking your own family's foundation." Victoria pointed a trembling finger at me. "You are just like your grandmother, vindictive and ungrateful. We gave you everything. You owe us this support." I sat down, calmly placing a sleek black briefcase on the table, which instantly drew their eyes. "I owe you nothing," I stated, my voice low and steady. "I have provided hundreds of thousands of dollars in capital and 5 years of proprietary technology to keep Austin's failures afloat. And the only response I received was a text telling me my breathing annoyed you." I looked directly at Victoria. "That was your final transaction with me." Austin finally spoke, his voice rising in panic. "The Synapse deal. It collapsed. They pulled out, claiming we breached an IP clause. That was my lifeline, Sierra. Did you do something?" I smiled slightly, a cold, genuine smile of finality. "Yes, Austin, I did. Synapse Dynamics received a legal report detailing the theft of my quantum-resistant code, which you repackaged and tried to sell them." Walter's jaw dropped. "Theft? That code belongs to the family. You developed it while using family capital." "Wrong, Dad," I corrected him sharply. "I developed it on my own time, on my own hardware, and only licensed it for emergency use when Austin crashed your firm 5 years ago. It remains my IP, and since you consider me not a place for you, I've taken my property back." I opened the briefcase and slid 3 sealed documents across the table. "You wanted to know why Synapse pulled out. They decided they didn't want the legal risk of stolen goods, so I offered them a better deal." I paused, allowing the tension to coil tight in the room. "I have officially licensed 80% of my proprietary quantum-resistant security system to Synapse Dynamics, the very technology Austin was trying to sell in stolen snippets. The terms are excellent, providing my firm with an immediate upfront payment of $2 million and an ongoing royalty stream for the next decade." The room went silent, the only sound the faint ticking of Victoria's expensive watch. $2 million. The magnitude of the betrayal and my subsequent success hit them simultaneously. Walter found his voice first a choked whisper of pure disbelief. "You sold your family's saving grace to our biggest rival. You threw me out." "Walter," I replied, standing up to leave. "You treated me as a tool, a walking ATM, and then a nuisance. I simply followed your lead. I monetized my product, and you lost your crutch." I turned to Austin, whose face was pale. The only reason you exist at Lawson & Co. is because I chose to save you. Now I choose not to. You can't do this, Victoria cried out, finally showing raw emotion. We are your family. No, I countered, pausing at the door. You are not. You are a business liability I have decided to write off. The financial and digital consequences were already unfolding, but the real impact of my words, the knowledge that they had sacrificed their security for their arrogance, was the highest peak of the confrontation. The silence I left behind in the Lawson & Kerber boardroom was not emptiness, but a vacuum rapidly filling with financial and digital panic. My $2 million from Synapse Dynamics settled cleanly into my account, providing not just wealth, but an unshakable sense of peace. For them, however, the digital dam had broken. The immediate aftermath was swift and devastating. Within 24 hours, the two major portfolio companies that relied on my obsolete, downgraded security system were targeted in calculated surgical attacks. While no data was technically stolen, the old protocol still held basic functionality. The public reports detailing the severe, unpatched security vulnerability were enough. Investor confidence evaporated. Lawson & Co.'s stock plummeted 20% in a single day. Walter's reputation, which had been the firm's true asset, was instantly ruined. The most satisfying part of the collapse was watching the golden child finally turn to dust. Walter, facing the loss of his legacy and the public disgrace, didn't shield Austin this time. Instead, he unleashed decades of suppressed fury. The sheer depth of Austin's betrayal, stealing the IP that saved the company only to try and sell it to a rival, was the ultimate proof of his incompetence and greed. The confrontation between father and son, which I heard about from a highly placed contact, ended with Austin being publicly stripped of his C-level title and locked out of the executive system. Austin, who had always defined himself by the badge and the corner office, was professionally annihilated. As the internal implosion accelerated, I received a final poignant message from Chloe Davies. She had resigned, citing the firm's unethical practices and hostile environment. Her brief email simply said, "I'm out. Thank you, Sierra. You didn't just save yourself. You gave me the courage to leave." That small validation meant more than any check I had ever signed for the Lawsons. 48 hours later, the final blow came. The canceled recurring payments for the expensive data licenses hit their third overdue notice, leading to critical database lockouts. Without the core data needed for due diligence and investor reporting, Lawson & Co. effectively ceased to function. The firm was facing forced liquidation, and Walter was desperately trying to secure a last-minute bridge loan, only to find that every major bank was citing the security catastrophe and the massive IP breach as too high a risk. Then came the call. My private cell phone, which I used only for my consulting firm, lit up with the number I hadn't blocked, Victoria's personal number. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was raw, devoid of the cultivated coolness she usually wore like armor. "Sierra, you have to stop this. Walter is having a breakdown. The firm is gone. We need your help. We can restructure. You can come back. We'll make you Chief Technology Officer, give you a 25% stake, and Austin will report directly to you. This is more than fair." It wasn't a mother begging for her child. It was a desperate CEO making a final cynical offer to a key resource. She hadn't learned anything. "I had that chance 2 years ago, Mom," I said calmly. "I offered you Project Chimera and you refused. You valued Austin's ego over my expertise and your own company's security. But this is your chance to build the legacy to control everything." She pleaded, the facade of the powerful matriarch cracking completely. "My legacy isn't built on saving other people's failures," I countered. "It's built on my own success. I don't need a 25% stake in a sinking ship, Victoria. I already own the new ship, and it's sailing beautifully with Synapse Dynamics." I let the silence hang there, thick and heavy with finality. "Goodbye, Mom." I hung up, not with triumph, but with quiet peace. The system was offline. The debt was paid. I looked out over the Seattle skyline, the lights of the city cold and impersonal. Lawson and Cowan was just another failed business, and I, Sierra Lawson, was finally free to build my own empire without their parasitic weight.